What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York calling from the Alto again, and this time we are here with Eddie and Harald of the almighty Imminence. It is great to have you all here. Thanks for being on the show today.
Thanks for having us. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, it's an honor to have you all here with your new album, The Black. It is absolutely fantastic. Was the intention of this album to just make sort of like a continuation or a sequel to Heaven in Hiding, or was this meant to almost kind of signify like a new beginning for Imminence in a way?
Oh, I wouldn't say that it's actually really not related to Heaven and Hiding at all. I would say that this was really a fresh start for us. Maybe we didn't really have set out for the mission of creating something completely new. I mean, the album could turn out to be whatever, really whatever. We just really kind of went with our intuition into what felt right to create. But looking in retrospect here, I think when Eddie had the first direction of the first track of the album, we kind of knew that, okay, here is something new, really.
Yeah, it felt like we were really touching on a different kind of darkness with the first track that was written, which was Come Hell or High Water. And this kind of feeling, it really resonated with both me and Harold. And we kind of just kept digging into that hole to see what was going to be there at the end.
Was there sort of like a vision in mind at all? And not even just for this album, but for any album. Do you kind of go into it with a vision in mind or a preconceived goal, or is it a very like improvisational songwriting process? Because I think when you compare an album like This Is Goodbye to Turn the Lights On, etc., I feel like every album does tend to have its own unique aspect that makes them all sort of stand out.
No, we never set out like an idea of what the album would be. We like to work in a way of not setting any limitations to ourselves. And, you know, as soon as we find something, if you find that magic, then that's kind of when we start to go down that track. And I think that's why our albums sound very both differently, but also has their own thing in that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's just the road is laying ahead of you by itself, sort of. And you just, I think in the early state of a creative process, I think we're just kind of going with whatever feels right. And of course, we can write songs that sound pretty good. But I believe that subconsciously, I think both me and Ed are just looking for that something. And what that is, we don't really know, but it's just you have that same feeling for whatever new track you are writing. And what that sound is going to be like, can't really tell. But I think when we feel it, we know, right?
Well, so it's fair to say that the tracks that we've heard so far off of that, the singles that we heard so far off of The Black, such as The Black, the title track, as well as like Continuum or stuff, this isn't representative of the whole album. That's just one little taste of what's to come.
I think that, I mean, if you look at the title track, The Black, I do feel that track maybe offers more in terms of summing up what the whole album is and the different kind of styles that we are exploring on the record. But yeah, definitely we did try to set out, like that's the one thing that me and Harold spoke about during the writing process, is that we wanted to really make sure that, you know, every track has its own identity, and we really try to pursue something different with every song.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We did, but at the same time, I really feel like it wasn't the case that you're kind of trying to force something. Okay, we need to write a unique track here. It needs to be more unique than the other one we wrote. It's impossible to do that. I mean, because then you might just lock yourself in, like you paint yourself in the corner and be like, it has to be different. I think, funny enough, it just turned out to be that way, actually.
And you also mentioned too, like that emotional moment that you captured. And I'm really glad you mentioned that because do you find that when you are working on something for a long period of time, and you know you sometimes you're working on a song for days or weeks or months, do you find it like the longer you work on something, the harder it is to sort of capture and maintain that moment in a way?
Yeah, definitely in terms of the faster a song gets put together and you feel good about it and excited about it, I feel that it's better because you can kind of you lose the perspective you have of the song when you've been working on it for months. And this is something that we've done, on our previous albums sometimes. But this album was really, really easy for us in a way to work on together because we didn't have a track like that really. There was maybe one track that we did end up to rewrite, but that was just because, when we had the full album in front of us, we felt and listened through the songs, we felt, okay, this track does stick out in a way that is not really fitting as well as the other songs to the record. So we decided to rewrite it, but it's been pretty quick process for us to write The Black.
Yeah. Again, it's sort of I think we came to that point now, nowadays, that when we know, we kind of know. You get the feeling from like a basic idea that this speaks the same language where we want to go or not. And if it does, we go into it. Sometimes you might hit a wall a little bit. And then I think we've kind of let ourselves being able to just let it rest. Okay, let's just leave it then. Don't work on that today. Work on something else then in that case.
And now this leads, because I know with the new album coming out, I feel like it's also an important year for Imminence because this year does mark 10 years since we've heard the debut of Imminence with your first album. And I still think that tracks such as 86 or Salt of the Earth or Broken Lost are all fantastic tracks. I'm just wondering, turning back the clock a little bit, what were some memories you had with the making of that debut? Because, the very famous saying, you have your whole life to create your first record. But, and obviously with a couple of EPs under your belt, such as Born of Cyrus and Return to Hellos and stuff, there was already songs that were written, but this is the debut album. So what was the sort of thought process making that? And did it at all maybe influence what you would later do in This Is Goodbye and so on?
I think that we were kind of in a transitional phase, I would say, of how we were writing songs during the I record. So on the first EPs we did, we wrote all the songs together in the rehearsal and jammed them together until they were done, basically. And I would say the I record, we started to move more into pre-production and creating the songs in the computer. So it was kind of like a little bit of mix of both there. And we did write the whole album in our rehearsal studio. It was a pretty special time. We met up in Malmö for a long period of time and hung out in rehearsal, wrote that album, and yeah.
Well, I think after writing what we maybe didn't realize at the time was that already at that time, 10 years ago, we were able to identify some really key points for what Imminence is. And I think we found it quite early on. But given the contemporary trends or whatever, I think we were writing a pretty strange album, because it really didn't follow like the same format as other sort of metalcore at that time. And maybe that made us kind of feel like, oh, we're maybe a bit too far off here. And honestly, personally, after writing and recording the I album, I was drained. I remember that 10 years ago, it was draining. I had nothing. I'm done. I'm done for right now. And that kind of led us into something else. And it took us a really long time to write the next album. I think we wrote maybe 2-3 albums and we just scrapped it because I don't really know why. I just felt like we put so much effort into the first album, and then you kind of just want to get to the next step. But what the next step actually was, we didn't really know. So yeah,
I think that it's what we talked about before, that I think we were kind of looking for that special something. And even though, like, when we were writing after the I album, and as you said, we were writing so many songs, I felt like we didn't really find that something to connect. And This Is Goodbye was the first track that we wrote from that album, and I remember when we kind of figured it out, and me and Harold we just knew that this was something we were looking for at that time.
You ever worry?
Yeah, it's hard. Like, sorry. Yeah. No, I just wanted to say, like in the beginning, like when you've done everything you think you can as a debut album, because that's how we looked at it. It's like, oh my God, it's the debut album. It's the big. It's like, this is the big one. Like, we gotta make it happen, and you just pour everything you can into that. Then where do you go, right?
Well, I mean, so it's sort of like a double-edged or catch-22. Like, to put it to you this way, what are some of the most famous debut albums we've ever heard? Hybrid Theory by Linkin Park, Appetite for Destruction by Guns N' Roses. Fantastic albums. They're timeless. They're still selling those records today. But let's be real. This opinion does exist, but it is rare. Not a lot of people think Meteora or Minutes to Midnight or the albums that came after that. I love it when the Pets photobomb the background. By the way. But Minutes to Midnight, a lot of people think, or a lot of the work Linkin Park put out after Hybrid Theory is considered inferior. I have yet to meet one Guns N' Roses fan who likes GNR Lies or the Use Your Illusion albums, and definitely not Chinese Democracy, better than Appetite for Destruction. So you don't want to be enslaved to your first album, but at the same time, look at some of the most famous bands, and their debut album is not usually their best, and they don't hit the ground running, and maybe it's not until they put out their second, third, or maybe even fourth album. There's a lot of bands, especially in the metalcore world, where people don't even know that their first album exists. When I show people All That Remains, a lot of people know All That Remains from The Fall of Ideals and Overcome, but they listen to that first album, and it's like straight up guttural death metal, like almost melodic Cannibal Corpse. So like it does surprise a lot of people in a way.
Yeah, I think it's kind of freeing in a way, because then you can kind of go wherever you want to go. I mean, yeah, you can still do, but like if you write a Hybrid Theory, then people expect to hear more of that because it's such a great album. So even though you don't have to restrict yourself, which Linkin Park didn't do, there is still some kind of expectation upon you.
Yeah, of course. But I still consider Imminence's music to be relatively more on the experimental side in a way, because there are parts that are just straight up brutal heavy. I don't want to be in the pit during certain songs that you guys are playing. And then you bring in anthem melodic parts that are very, very serenading to people as well. So it's almost fair to say that trying new things is not really much of an obstacle for Imminence. It almost seems to be just as much part of the songwriting process, right?
Yeah, it's more of a rule than an exception, I would actually say. That maybe I have a hard time to say that we are a progressive band, that because we are not using the progressive band formula in that way. I mean, we're kind of straight to the point with a lot of things. Like, we don't use crazy chord progressions, or we're not using... We're not as advanced in terms of rhythm as Meshuggah or something like this. But I think what we are able to do, and the balance we're able to find between our different elements, is kind of unique for us. And maybe that's where our progressive formula lies.
Yeah. But it's also cool to hear that you like some songs of the I album. Is when we were creating the Black, I feel that it's the first time we've actually gone back to the I record and said, this part here, what we did on our debut album was pretty cool. Maybe we could try something similar here for this track.
Sometimes the best new plan is the old plan. Like, you want to move. I've always wondered why people think that in order to move forward, everything that they've done has to be disregarded. Obviously, you need to explore new territory. Discomfort is needed in order for growth and stuff like that. But that doesn't mean you should completely disregard the past. I mean, as an artist myself, I look at my early work with a much cringe, but there's still stuff to be learned in your earlier stuff.
Absolutely. And there's nothing really you can just learn from it, because it was, I think, meaningful to you at the time, really. And it's something that is representative of who you were then. And I don't think you ever just completely changed. There's still that part left in you from all our albums.
Yeah. And also, like, records prove that time is pretty relative. Like, for example, I didn't discover I back in 2014. I discovered I like I think around. I discovered you guys on Turn the Lights On, so then I would go back and listen to the rest of the catalog. So really, when I listen to it takes me back to 2019, not to 2014. It takes me back to that time period. To a lot of fans who may be discovering you now, I may take them back to 2024 when they discover you guys through the Black. So
Yeah, I guess so. You always tie it to a certain part of your life when you really discover that album. I remember for myself sitting on the bus home from school and I listened to Root to Remain from In Flames, and I remember just having the feeling that my head exploded when I heard those choruses. Like, how can you write music like this? How can you make it feel and sound like this? And every time I put it on, it's just, I'm there. I'm like 16 again.
it's always great how music can be both relevant in the current times but also take you back to the time. I've always said that music is the closest thing we've gotten to, it's almost like psychological time travel.
Definitely, I would definitely say so. I don't know. Like, I remember you guys, Eddie, when we were hanging out when we were kids. I wasn't really into that new metal stuff that you listen to, but when I hear it now, I can appreciate it. But I think back at those days, I think back on like 2007 and what was cool back then, and who we were at that time.
Yeah, definitely.
Now, I have a couple questions specifically for each of you. I'll start with Eddie, and that is with your vocal style, because you have a fantastic range and many different usages of your voice, but there's also lyrics that you factor into your music. Has there ever been a time where maybe a conceptual idea or maybe a lyrical meaning helped guide the material with regards to the sound? Did maybe a concept dictate the music in a way, or have you always preferred to have music present before you could come up with lyrics?
I mean, it's a bit of both. Like, I usually don't write full songs with lyrics beforehand. I usually just scribble down different lines or thoughts, and as much as I can. And Harald comes with an instrumental, and then we start looking around what could be fitting here and like build a concept around a few phrases. But there has been instances, of course, like I remember Alleviate was definitely a song like that, where I wrote the full lyrics to the song and mapped out some chords on the acoustic guitar, and then we met up and wrote it into a full song. But there's also, like, sometimes I get really hung up on certain phrases, and definitely Come Hell or High Water was one of those for me. I was just coming back to again and again and again, and I felt like I really needed to do something with it, and that's how the idea for that song was born. And I just like came from that and just started playing with sounds and trying to create a song on my own. But same, with different, even the instrumental tracks on this record was the same way. In that way, like cul-de-sac was a phrase that's been lingering with me for years. And we started working with a different soundscape for this album, to make it more dramatic and cinematic. And that kind of inspired me to write a song in that way as well.
And Harold, because there's so many different usages of the voice and there's many different concepts, do you almost feel like you have to sort of adjust your playing technique or your style in order to suit the vocals in a way?
I think I just write for the song, for the best sake of the song, really. And for previous releases, maybe sometimes when we felt that, or I have felt that, okay, we need to go into another direction here. We need to try to make it more, I don't know, maybe more vocal driven or so. We need to work more with Eddie's voice, and maybe more choruses, and the guitars and the instruments should maybe be more like backing it up. Maybe by that time I did feel like a bit restrained in that way, but on the other hand, it turned out to be a really good song. So that part really learned a lot for me as an instrumentalist, because I feel like I am able to choose my battles, sort of say. I can choose to put myself more into the front light a little bit more, even if I'm not really a solo guitarist, but I believe that there are other nuances that are coming through that are actually mine, and where I can go off the tracks a little bit with a riff or with something else that I feel is more but where I feel like my personality comes through a bit more. But I believe it's always about balance in our music, and that's something we found in this album.
Well, I've always said too that guitar solos are very much like the second singer of the band in a way, where it's able to convey emotion through melody. So when it comes to the guitar soloing, and Eddie, you could chime in on this too with laying down vocal melodies. Does the having music, is it almost like you need a rhythm section, or you need like background music in order to like let the melodic parts that are going to shine, i.e., vocal melodies or guitar solos? Do you prefer to sort of have that music present in order to know where the shining melodic parts are going to be?
I do feel that way. Like, of course, you can have everyone is working differently. I know a lot of friends or vocalists that maybe write down vocal lines or sing them into their voice memos or so. But I usually never do that because I kind of feel like the music needs to evoke some kind of emotion in me. And then I will use that as inspiration for whatever melody is going to be on top.
Yeah, I felt that when we've had a demo or something, and we try to work maybe with a chorus line or something, or some leading melody, and it just never clicked. And that happened, of course, and we're not really able to make anything of it. At the same time, I can sometimes be able to just present an instrumental foundation, like a demo, and all of a sudden you just know what it is, and you just feel it. And the reason why that chorus or that vocal line or the string arrangement just worked so well was because it was just speaking the same language. The foundation was there, so it becomes easy to finalize it.
And when it comes to getting that sort of inspiration, whether it will be for lyrical ideas or for riffs or anything like that, for song ideas, do you almost, can you look for inspiration? Could you go out and seek it out, or do you just have to kind of let the inspiration strike you?
In my case, I'm usually waiting for it a bit. When, if we are sitting together and writing a song, then I will maybe create new stuff as we're here, to go along with whatever idea we have. But when it comes to finding inspiration, at least for lyrics, I'm kind of, sometimes I would hear a phrase, or sometimes I would read something in a book, or find something from a movie that could inspire me. And then, I would scribble down some lines. But I don't have a go-to, at least for lyrics.
For me, it's sort of, I feel like I need to kind of put myself in the right context. I need to make myself available for that inspiration. I need to be in the right state of mind for it. Because sometimes it's easy to, because we're running everything on our own, right? Like, we're a self-sustainable, independent band. We're taking care of all aspects, right? And it's easy to sometimes to work with the other part of your brain that is very logical and very like oriented in terms of getting things done. And then there is the other part. And sometimes you need to let that part of your brain come out a little bit and let the other one rest. Because you don't want to fill up your attention too much with all that non-important stuff.
The artist's mind and like the business side, both equally important, are like it is the biggest colluding thing ever. Like every artist, and every artist is burdened with this. There are plenty of artists who they could paint like crazy, they could shred circles, sing their asses off, but know nothing about the business, and their band or their art suffers as a result of it. And then there's people who know how to market themselves, they know how to really present their stuff and all that, but the work is so melancholy and mediocre that it almost just feeds people bullshit, excuse the phrasing. So I feel like it really is finding that balance between the business side and the artistic side.
Absolutely, definitely.
Now, circling back to with the sort of vocal, with the heavier and more melodic parts of Imminence, do you feel like that with those emotions that we talked about before, that you use both the more softer parts and the heaviest parts to express almost different personalities or different sides of yourselves in a way?
Yeah, I guess it also just goes, with the part. I mean, I love both styles in that way of screaming and softer vocals, and it's whatever the song needs really. But I find it interesting every time we work on a new album because I'm able to maybe figure out something about my voice that I didn't know before, which I definitely think you can hear on our new record. Is like some of the vocals you've never really heard me do before on previous records.
Yeah, and same thing goes for guitar work, I think, and in general, well, all instrumentals. Like there is some crazy blast stuff and almost like black metal harmonies and stuff that we are going through on this one. At the same time as we have like really moody, fuzzy post rock guitars, and I think we're moving in a huge soundscape with this album. I think it just shows off kind of like all the different kind of jackets that we can put on and still be ourselves,
It almost serves as like in a way like the black I almost feel like is sort of like a retrospective of what we heard off of I and This Is Goodbye, Turn the Lights On, and Heaven in Hiding. I feel like it's almost a retrospective of everything you've been able to do previously, but at the same time while demonstrating evolution as well.
Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. And that led me to the final question, and that is the topic of evolution as an artist. Do you think an artist, it's kind of like a little debate, do you have control over your own evolution? Do you have a say in how you evolve as an artist, whether it is on a technical level or just on an artistic level? Like, do you have control over that, or do you just kind of, because at the same time, we've all been told you can't rush how you get better. I'm sure we all look at our earliest stuff and all have had trouble at the very beginning, so you can't rush it either. So do you just have to let evolution happen, or can you actually push it forward?
Really tough one. You go ahead.
Yeah, I do think you have a control to a certain extent, and it's also about your mindset. For example, if you have that successful release and everyone wants you to sound like that first album, what are you going to do with that fact? Like what are people's expectations on you? And one thing that we always did, I mean, we never had a massive breakout album, of course, but we always try to get rid of all expectations when we are in the writing process, because we just need to find that that clicks with us in writing music, something that evokes emotions within ourselves. And I think that there's certain ways you can develop yourself musically and creatively, and I think it's about a lot about practice as well. You can look at it in different ways, but creative practice is kind of just like writing songs, and just continue the work while trying to separate those two brains we were talking about.
Yeah, I completely agree. And for me, it's more like we are moving we are existing in a music scene, in a genre that is kind of close-minded in a way, where it's so easy to be labeled. Like you are this and you are that. And who, except for yourself, is able to tell you what you are? Just because you happen to release an album that sounded in a way 2 years ago, and now I might recognize myself as a musician or a creator as something else. And well, if you feel like this is what you do and this feels like the good direction and the right thing for you to do and the right development, then that's for you to decide. I think it's not really up to anyone else to tell you what your next step should be. I think that should be up to you always.
Yeah, it's like you could pick the path you take, but you don't have control over what you're going to endure on that path.
Pretty much. Pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So before we go, I want to thank you both so much for your time today, for such an awesome interview, and most of all, thank you for your music. This new album, The Black, is absolutely amazing. Is there just anything else with Imminence you'd like to promote with the release of The Black in terms of upcoming shows, tours? What else could we be expecting, if you're allowed to say at this moment, of course?
Well, definitely. I mean, we're going over to America really soon. So, yeah, we're going to do a tour. The album tour, Black Tour, is going to premiere actually in America. And we really hope to see as many of you there and come hang out with us at our shows.
Yep. I'm interviewing Of Virtue next week, who I know is on the bill. So I'm excited to be able to help promote that tour to the fullest.
Amazing.
I appreciate it a lot. Thanks for having us, and we're really glad to hear that you enjoyed the new album.
Thank you. I'm glad you guys are able to give it to us. Everybody, we are here with Imminence. Be sure to check out The Black. This is Alex from Heavy New York, and we will see you next time.